this morning about ballistics coefficient and the craze that's gotten progressively very much worse since I first started doing these video series. I think it's very apparent that we've got a very inexperienced, and I emphasize very inexperienced, crowd driving this. Money's driving this for years and years and years and years, for better than my lifetime, or at least my lifetime. We've heard about sectional density of bullets. We've heard about ballistics coefficients. And the old hands at this aspect of things have, as a rule, emphasized sectional density. Sectional density is the ability of the bullet to penetrate deep, provided it's got proper construction in a game animal and properly dispatch the animal. All this is compared, sectional density is figured on the caliber of the bullet, the length of the bullet, the weight of the bullet, and one thing another. And this present crowd, including the ammunition manufacturers, the bullet manufacturers, people that are actually putting together rifles to shoot too far. It seems like all that we have to do is take a particular caliber of bullet. Let's just take, for instance, the .270 caliber bullet. And for years and years, we've had all that we needed in .270 caliber bullets and bullet weights and bullet construction from Nosler and from Barnes and a few others that will do the proper job with the .270 caliber bullet within the bullet weight ranges. And one of the reasons that I'm emphasizing these things is because every time one of the companies building bullets come up with a bullet, they add another 20 or 30 points to the ballistics coefficient of the bullet. Well, gosh, this is just magic. It's voodoo. It's just absolutely voodoo is what it is. This is nonsense. There's never been a game animal on the face of this earth that was killed with a ballistics coefficient. It's the performance of the bullet with the necessary energy and the ability to penetrate deep with reasonable sectional density, proper bullet placement at reasonable ranges. Reasonable ranges. We've got the 6.8 Westerner. One of the gun writers writes about this wonderful sectional density, how this is added in instances 100 or a couple hundred yards to the usefulness of this cartridge, indicating that it's a 7, 8, 900 yard cartridge. 7, 8, 900 yard cartridge for what? You see, it's not a cartridge for elk hunting. And at the same time all this stuff's going on, they keep dropping the necessary energy value that we need to be able to dispatch animals. This is driven by politics, greed, and money, and inexperience. I have the experience, as I've said in the past, far beyond any of these people that are writing about these things. We do have a writer that has a considerable amount of experience. His name is Wayne Van Zyl. He's written books. He's written in a lot of magazines for years. And the last edition of the Bugle magazine put out by the Elk Foundation, he had an article in there. Has decided that the least thing that you need to pay attention to is the ballistics coefficient, because he thinks that it's just gotten carried plumb out of hand, overrated, and we're using smaller and smaller and smaller calibers and so forth to reach way out here. I've hunted and killed a tremendous amount of game and been on a tremendous amount of game kills, far more than most people could ever dream of. I've lived a wonderful, wonderful life and experienced these things. And one of the biggest things that disgusts me beyond my being able to explain is the absolute disregard for these animals. It's all about a big ego, getting my picture taken and all this stuff. It's really taken a surge here in these past about 2 years where we are with these situations. And I've explained in previous video what I think is long range, and I think that 5 to 600 yards is a long range, and I don't think anybody needs to be shooting past that. And I'll qualify this very, very emphatically, and here's why. Let's say, for instance, you shoot an elk. You shoot an elk, and he's at 825 yards, and he's just out of the fringe of the timber. And you make a good hit on that elk, and he goes down. Well, you better stay there for a while, right where you're at, to make sure that he stays down and he doesn't get back up. Because here's the true picture. That animal only has to take about 3 or 4 steps, he's into the timber. And if you've ever been in any timber in vast parts of the backcountry, the wilderness country of the mountains of Wyoming, or anywhere else, once an animal, an elk or whatever it may happen to be, gets into that timber, quite likely you're never going to find him if that bullet didn't hit that elk just right, if everything didn't work just perfect for you. The other thing is, if you shoot at something that far, and I've shot at something that far, it takes you quite a while to get there. I shot an elk 30-some years ago at 825 yards, the only time that I ever did it, because of course I'm building long-range rifles, and I wanted to do this, but I knew exactly what I was doing. I had a dead still day. I hit the elk absolutely perfectly. The 175 nozzle partition went all the way through the elk and into the hill on the other side. Had a quarter-size hole on the off side of the elk, and the elk dropped in his tracks. It took me 50 minutes to get there. Well, I reflected on all this as I went to retrieve my elk. And as I thought this over, dressing that elk, quartering it up, and my son and I taking most of the day to get it off the mountain. We didn't have horses or mules. 1 quarter at a time, carried or drug those quarters off the mountain in the snow. Now, that was a perfect day. But there are damn few perfect days at long range in the mountains of Wyoming or anywhere here in the West where the wind blows and one thing another. And if you hit an animal poorly, you don't have a snowball's chance of ever retrieving that elk. It took you that long to get there, 15 minutes to get there or whatever. Already, the plot has really thickened. And this is where these things enter in. I know There's a vast difference of shooting a deer and antelope out here on the prairie at, say, 300 yards, and you can keep track of it a lot better. But when you have some timber that enters into this, you could spend days. You could spend days and never find that animal. And if it's not hit correctly, an animal to die to suffer. And this is what's happening here in Wyoming. Tremendous, tremendous, I think, from my point of view, my knowledge, my understanding, the information that I get, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of around 14 or 15 bighorn rams that I'm aware of that were never recovered on that hunt because people are shooting at long range. Guides are handing a rifle of theirs to a hunter that's never fired the rifle, never in his life shot at long range, and wounding these animals. And somebody has got to step up beside myself. I feel like I'm the only voice out here that has a voice for our wildlife. And this is absolutely disheartening. It's disgusting, is what I see. After the situation that I described, the elk that I killed many years ago, I reflected on that for months and years. And I've never attempted that again. Even though I have the equipment, I have all the equipment that anybody could ever hope to want to be able to do some of these things. But I decided that after that experience, and it was a wonderful experience and it was a good day, but what if it was a bad experience and a poor day? It'd be the poorest day in the world for that animal. And our hunting is disappearing. The game is disappearing, is what I'm talking about. Our hunting is disappearing. There's a vast difference between being out in the mountains and hunting and having any game to hunt. We have damn little to hunt here in this part of Wyoming. We have game that comes in here way after the season from way west of here, migrates into some of this country. We have game that's on some of these private properties, locked up by wealthy landowners, game that I own as a taxpayer, for instance, of Wyoming. And the last thing that we need is to create a miserable, terrible picture for the hunting fraternity. And boy, it's going nuts. These people think absolutely nothing of it. Absolutely nothing of it. Pick a little small cartridge, such as a 6.8 Westerner, and put a 175 grain bullet in it, and it's just voodoo magic. It doesn't work like this. Not in the reality, the actual practical sense. It doesn't work. The first thing that you need to pay attention to is that animal. And there is not a gadget or a widget, a wind meter, an app, a ballistics calculator, a smartphone, or anything that can tell you what the weather's doing 3/4 of a mile away, half a mile away. There will never be anything to tell you. These are the real aspects. I've killed a lot of game, probably several dozen head of game, out to around 650 yards. An occasional shot, maybe almost at 7. But almost all of my hunting, and as I've built various rifles for myself and done some of this experimenting, invariably, all this fine equipment, it boils down to I'm killing my elk at less than 300 yards or maybe less than 200 yards. Well, that's a lot better thing. If you make a poor hit in an open area, on an elk, you probably got another chance or a few chances to be able to take care of the problem in the open. But you sure as the world don't have any chance at all at extreme range, because of the time it takes you to get there and all the aspects involved. We'll call it the logistics of the situation. And it just isn't workable. So this ballistics coefficient, all people are doing is bypassing some of the various extremely fine rifle bullets that have been made for years that do a wonderful job. Well, it doesn't have the ballistics coefficient. Well, for crying out loud, folks. A .270 caliber rifle is at the most, in reasonable situation, with reasonable energy and reasonable bullet weight, about a 5 to possibly 600 yard cartridge at the very, very most. Not a 7, 8, 900 yard cartridge. Under no set of circumstances. A lot of years ago, I had some friends that I've known since I was just a youngster. One of them since I was about 5 years old. And they were really hunters. They're gone, passed away. But I remember they had a friend that was with them one day, and he had a Winchester Model 70 .338 rifle, .338 Winchester, the .338 Alaskan, pre-64. And they got into some elk, and this friend of mine shot an elk at something close to 500 yards, because that was about what he considered his limit. And it just dropped that elk. And that impressed this fella. These same two people, along with one of the other fella's son, was hunting moose. And they located a moose. And it's probably pretty hard to approach him closer than the 450 yards. And the guy had a 6.5 Remington Magnum, a model 700, I believe that it was. And he looked at my friend that was carrying the .338, and he says, "I don't have enough gun," he said, "to kill that moose." Well, this day and age, all he would have had to have was a higher ballistics coefficient bullet to kill that moose at 450 yards. That's nonsense. He simply set his rifle down. He knew where this friend of mine's rifle was sighted in for, and he made the elevation correction and killed that moose with one shot at 450 yards with a .338 Winchester. And within days, when he was in town at home, he got on the phone and he bought two Winchester Model 70s, one for himself and one for a son. And they swore up and down with the .338s. Well, there's a vast difference hitting an elk at 500 yards with a .338 Winchester with proper bullets, and there is hitting an elk at 500 yards with a 6.8 Westerner. And there's always going to be a vast difference. I've killed game with small calibers and game up to .358 calibers, and I have one of the very best cartridges in .338 caliber that I think was ever conceived, something that I designed and built, which I call the .338 404 Wapiti Express. Now that rifle is an honest, longer range elk rifle. I've never killed an elk past about 600 yards with that rifle. It's got the ability, energy-wise and whatnot, and accuracy-wise, to shoot elk considerably further, I'll just simply get closer. We've got these clowns that are...
You're hunting?
Yeah, I'm hunting. Thanks, Kathy. I'm hunting. I just love to hunt. I would get no thrill at all out of locating an elk at 450 yards and then backing up 500 yards to shoot at it. And this is what some of these clowns are doing. It's exactly what they're doing. And wounding it. There's nobody that has the abilities and can call themselves an expert, a long-range experts. I know what's happened to all this long-range expert aspect. They don't know the accuracy game. They've never understood the accuracy game. They don't have the experience. And they don't have the practical knowledge or the practical sense to realize what they're doing. When our hunting is gone, it is going to be finished. It's going to be gone forever. And these people could give a damn. And they go to great lengths to promote this sort of aspect on a little number, a ballistics coefficient. Well, the best thing for you to do is to practice with your rifle, and don't try to stretch your ability or the rifle, the cartridge, the component ability beyond reason. I know what this is all about. I've been testing these things for a lifetime. I know what works. And it's what really amazes me somewhat the most is the very best bullets that we've had for a lot of years in various calibers are being completely and totally ignored in exchange for a poorly constructed high ballistic coefficient bullet. Almost in every instance, not all, but most instances, these high BC bullets don't have the ability to be able to properly perform, properly expand. There's no mass left to the bullet. The bullet has went to pieces. These things just simply do not work. It's sad, but it seems like they're just nothing. If somebody tells somebody something, think about it. Think about these aspects. It just isn't related to just shooting and hunting and bullets. There's lots of aspects in life too. Think about some of these things. You see, it's gotten completely out of hand. It's gotten to the point where there's just absolutely no help for stupid. You just can't help stupid. It's just period. You just can't help it. And, it's sad. The greatest share of correspondence that I get, people get the message. But we've got just enough people out here, and they're just hell-bent on destroying what my tax dollars have built over the years. And when it's all gone, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? The game's gone. Don't you care? I don't see an organization. I don't see a game department. I don't see a gun magazine. I don't see a conservation-minded organization standing up for any damn thing. The Elk Foundation promotes itself, and they do some wonderful, wonderful things. But they're not interested in protecting the elk. They're not interested in protecting the hunting. And nobody else is doing it. I have a mechanic that's been working on my vehicles for about 30 years. And he is an avid hunter. And he has experienced absolutely the worst the worst slob hunting. He's in his 60s, middle 60s. What I'm describing is slob hunting. This long-range crowd lending rifles to an outfitter for the clients to use and shooting at elk clear on out as far as a mile. He witnessed 160 rounds of rifle fire. Elk wounded at extreme distance, never followed up. These things were reported to our game department. Nobody ever did anything with the game department. He's reported it a number of years in a row, different situations. Somebody's got to get a hold of this. I'm not the only guy that knows that this stuff's going on, but I'm the only guy that's standing up and speaking up for it. And I'm going to continue to stand up and speak up. This is my life. This is my passion. This is our wildlife that you're destroying. And one of the most wonderful pastimes in the world is hunting and shooting and building guns and being in the outdoors and observing this wildlife, not just hunting, but year-round. We have game that comes in here, a small, very small amount, the winters here, and we just love to see them. They're part of our extended family, and that's how I feel. All the elk, all the deer, the mountain sheep, the moose, doesn't make any difference. All these animals, as far as I'm concerned, are part of me. I helped build this. How can I not feel like it's part of me? My dollars have went to build these things, but my dollars are being used by game departments, by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and other organizations. By ignoring this thing, you're letting it go right straight to hell. And it's no good. You better get a hold of things. Some idiots pushed to have an initiative in Colorado to have wolves planted in Colorado. Wolves migrated from this part of the country into Colorado. They had wolves, but these people are never satisfied with anything. Those people want to destroy hunting. That's their sole purpose, is to destroy hunting. And every one of you folks, every one of you organizations that are not doing one damn thing about it and speaking up, you're just as bad as those people. You're just like those folks that are promoting this and promoting the plant of wolves clear across this United States and maybe in other parts of the world. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous what's happened. So, better get a hold of it. If you've got any time, if you've got any ability, if you've got ability to contact somebody who really will do something, you need to get with it. There needs to be a group of concerned people, such as myself, brought together to upright things, because everything is going to hell, just like everything else in this country is going to hell. Thank you.